Hey there, Graph Jumpers, Misso Plays here, and this week I've got a video for all my fellow loot goblins out there. Yes, indeed, Starfield companions hate this one weird trick to liven up your outposts. That is, of course, decorating with junk items.
You might wish to lighten your load. One is less likely to survive an ambush when one is weighed down with whatever all that is.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I am willing to die for this desk toy. Sorry. And if you too are willing to lay your life down for a lamp planter, then come join me here at this work in progress, and I will talk about the different mechanisms we can use to place junk items in our outposts, as well as some tricks to make the process a little easier, and how we can go about avoiding sunken items and displaced goods. Because as we can see here, like getting the furniture down and the layout is only really the first step. And it's really like the item placement and decoration that kind of brings it all to life. So how we go about this? There are two main ways, and the first one is in game mode. And to do this, you want to highlight the item you want to place by holding down the take button. For me, that is the A button. And that picks up the item, and then you can spin it around using the left and right triggers on the Xbox and I believe left and right mouse button on PC. And pressing the left thumbstick, or I believe shift key, will allow you to switch the axis on which the item will rotate. And that multi-dimensional rotation really is one of the biggest strengths of the game mode method of placement. You can also see that the items maintain their physics, which is kind of useful for placing, but also can be a little dangerous for them getting knocked about. Now the other option is to go into build mode and just click on the item like you would, a piece of furniture you wanted to move. In this method, you can rotate it, but you can only rotate it on the one axis. But as you can see, it's a lot more stable. And the other limitation is the items maintain a bigger collision box, so you can't stack them or typically place them as close to each other as you can in the game mode. But one of your NPCs walks by that table and hip checks it, they're not going to send it flying. So each one has its pros and each one has its cons. When I'm building, I like to use a mixture of both. Here I have exited the build mode so that I can place this one board game on top. And I like to use a hybrid between the two because you get to use the positives of each. Like here in build mode, we're going to place this pamphlet holder. And by placing it in build mode, we can put things in it more easily without it getting sent, flying every time we try to do that, like these darts. Now, not every hollow object is hollow. Some of them actually have the collision of a solid object, and you'll try putting things inside. They won't go, they'll just sit on top. The pamphlet holder is not one of those, and I like those for the darts. And interestingly, you can use the build mode to place items inside things like these weapon display boxes, which is kind of surprising. I guess because they count as furniture, they act kind of like a tabletop. So there's a lot of versatility here if you want to show off, different objects, or your, Aurora smuggling or something like that. Now, one of the things with build mode too is it picks a orientation for the object and you can't change it. So like the gun here, it has to be upright. This hat is always upright, which isn't a bad thing, but with the gun, it's a little weird. So for that, you're going to want to use the game mode perhaps. Now, the complication there is if you hold down the A button, the take button, your character will equip it instead of picking it up. Now the workaround for that, I don't know why, is to highlight it and then looking through the scope of a scoped weapon, hold the take button and it'll pick it up and manipulate it the same as it did before. Weird. So that's the pickup part. Let's look at the placement part. I'm going to start with bookshelves, and one way to make this process easier is to turn your back on the bookshelf before you drop the books you want to place. And you see that they are now perpendicular towards the bookshelf, so they're always kind of oriented the way you want them, and that'll make it a lot easier. Now, the first book I like to put down in build mode wherever I can, because the lack of physics becomes really useful, and it essentially turns that book into a bookend. So now it'll prevent the books from falling over, getting knocked. As you can see, so we'll put the first one in build mode. Now we're coming back again with the second one in game mode. And as you see, I push it against that one book, and the first one doesn't move. So that gives it a nice stable surface to align everything. Now the first part, we don't have to worry about making these too neat. We just need to get them slotted in as close together as best we can. So, and this one here, you can see it's getting stuck, and you have to kind of like pick it back up again. You might be tempted to leave it, let gravity take its course, but don't. That seems to be one of the flying object triggers. For some reason, it kind of just explodes when you leave, if you leave a stuck object like that, rather than dropping gently down. So even if it gets stuck and you think it might fall into place, pick it back up, replace it. Otherwise, it's going to be like the Psalm happened in your bookcase for reasons I don't quite understand, if I'm honest. And as you can see back there, you can kind of like level things off once they're in place, but there's not a lot of point doing it first, because if you do it first, you'll knock it around a lot more and it'll just get frustrating. So, like level it up once it's in. I'm gonna switch these two around. Yeah, put the small one on top. Looks a bit better. I like to put some of the side-lying ones down too. One, as you can see, this is a process, and that shortens it, but also it makes it look a little more homey. Now another set of shelves you might want to use are wall shelves. Again, they're weird in their own way, especially if you put them quite high up. The items just don't want to go. In fact, trying to get things in build mode on shelves, period, is difficult. Like you have to put the cursor basically, like 1 or 2 shelves lower, and that's the secret. But one way of making this easier still is if we take the shelf, we put it down somewhere really low so we can look down on the surface, and then we can place things in build mode. We can only do this part in build mode, and you'll see why in a minute. Also, when you do it this way, so you can look down on top on this particular wall shelf, you can see it's kind of like an indent, and things will sit in it better. If you're not looking down on top of it, sometimes they kind of float in space above it. If you're lucky, it'll go down. A lot of the time it'll just give you that needs support error, which is annoying. But because we placed these in build mode on the shelf, we can actually move them all now as one object, kind of like, like a rug with a table on it. And if you find like a lot of spaces that you don't like, you can kind of fill it in using the game mode. It's still a bit of a pain in the ass, if I'm honest, when it's high up, but it is an option, and options are great. Now this next little bit isn't a placement tip, it's more of a junk idea, I guess. One of the things I find a bit frustrating in the game is we've got a lot of these big crates, not a lot of small ones. But you can fill in that like build menu gap with certain junk items like ship parts, if you're not into piracy. If you are into piracy, you can get similar shaped crate items but with a different skin. Lots of the resources have these cool little, I guess, tins. And clothing is a personal favorite of mine too, because depending on the angle, depends on what it looks like. So you can keep reusing that asset next to each other without it getting really repetitive looking and unnatural. And on the subject of junk ideas, if your looting habits look kind of like this, allow me to make a case for picking up literal garbage. Even in the tidiest of homes, you usually find a little bit of trash. And I find that these are like the little details that make your outpost look less like a show home and more like a space that somebody actually lives in. So go forth and piss off your companions by filling your pockets with lots of crap. When I first started out with my loot gobbling ways, I was super excited when I found a nice sculpture, and now the highlight of my looting trips is finding one of those squished synth foam packets. Those things are decorating gold. So now you've got a lot of things placed. Maybe you need to go fast travel somewhere, get some more bits. But I would recommend don't do that immediately after placing everything, because when you come back, that tends to be when things start sinking. You can see this crate down here has sunk. This moonshine jar here has sunk. And you can largely avoid this happening just by making an exit save and then loading back in after you've placed all your objects. That seems to set things and make them stay a lot more stable. Starfield really is a junk item collector's dream. So much attention to detail has gone into these things. It's a shame to not pick them up and put them to use. And since we have the outposts and player homes, why not give a little bit of garbage a home today? I hope that this video was useful to some of you. And if you found it in any way helpful or entertaining, please drop me a like and subscribe, and I will be back again next week with more building tips and outpost tours. Till then, bye!